Hi, I'm Chris and welcome to this video in learning Symfony 2. In this video we're going to be covering forms. We're going to be looking at how to create a basic form inside our controller, how to render that form in our view, and also how to handle the submission of that form back to our controller. We're going to look at the available form field types. There's quite a lot available with Symfony out of the box, so it's good to get sort of your head around what's available. We're going to have to look at how to look at rendering your form. There's like the noob mode, which is relatively straightforward, just to paste it in and paste some tags into your Twig template and get it displayed. And then we're going to look at how you will probably do it in the real world. It just allows you to customize it a heck of a lot more. We're going to look at changing the action and the method of your form. So that's like your post and your get and where it's posting to, where that data is actually going to. We're going to look at how to separate out our form logic from our controller into a reusable class. Don't worry too much if that's sounding completely foreign to you at the moment. It's more straightforward than it sounds. And we're going to look at form validation. You should never really trust the raw input from a user anyway. Symfony provides two different ways of validating data. There's front end, which we can't rely on, and we'll get to why. And then the server-side validation, which you should definitely be implementing. And it is straightforward to do as well, so no excuses. We're going to look at how to prevent cross-site request forgeries. As it says there, it sounds scary, but it's actually very easy. It's just a simple one-liner. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's crack on. So the old style of using forms, I've nicked an example here from Tizag, the well-known tutorial site. It's actually a terrible example, but it highlights a few things really that Symfony solves for us. So this is just like the template that you would have used in the olden days, perhaps. It's just a simple HTML form, nothing special. We're just posting off our form data to the process.php file, which we'll look at in a sec, and pretty much all we've got is a list of select, a drop-down box basically of items, paint brushes and whatever, and then the quantity which we type in as a text value, and then the submit. When you press submit, it fires across the process, and the process file is horrendous, but yeah, basically what it's saying is put the quantity, so quantity there, into, get it out of the post variable for post container sort of, into the quantity variable, and the same for the item, and then output it. So there's a few things here like that are terrible, such as there's no escaping of what's been typed in. We're just completely allowing our users to type in whatever they like, and we're accepting it as is, and then we're displaying it. Yeah, it isn't good, but that's like the old way of doing a form. I'm sure you've come across that in the past. So I just really wanted to cover like how it would look in the old way, and then how sort of it's going to look, even though we're not exactly doing this example. Yeah. So in Symfony, you're not going to end up with a form that looks like this. You're not going to end up with select tags here, and at least not from your perspective. From like a front end perspective, you will end up with something that looks like this, but from a developer's perspective, it doesn't look like this. But yeah, so the first thing to really know with Symfony is everything that you deal with forms is going to be using a class to put the data into that form. The data, how can I explain that better? Like, the thing that really confused me when I first started learning how to use the form builder in Symfony was how the data repopulates each of the different fields. So I'll cover what this is doing first. Ignore this bit. Let's comment that out. Basically what this is doing is creating a form, as it says, using the form builder. This is a built-in Symfony method. We're saying this create form builder. We're getting this from the controller, I believe. Yeah, from the controller, like inheriting this function, or this method, should I say. Now we would be passing in some data, but we don't have to there. We can get rid of that. And then we're adding some fields. So we're adding a name field, which is of type text. We're adding an age field, which is of type integer. So these are telling Symfony ahead of time like what sort of data to expect. We're adding our submit button. Now this is a relatively new thing. In the old, I think it was like Symfony 2.2, you didn't do it like this. You did this in the template itself, but from Symfony 2.3 you can do this via the controller. You can do this via the form builder, should I say. Then we're saying get the form, so like we've told it how to make a form, then we're saying get the form, and everything's stored into the form variable. And then simply we're returning this to our template. So we've just got a default template, which I'm going to cover in a sec, and we're passing in one variable to our template, which is the form, and we always need to call the create view method when we're displaying a form. So we'll go to index, and we have a very basic template. It's just extending from the base as it has been in all our examples, and then we're just outputting using a simple tag of form and our form name. Like this can be anything. So if we'd have called this like our form, then this would be form our form. Simple as that. And then if we go to the browser and refresh it, let's just do that. We have our blank form, and as you saw there was some data then populated in this, and I'll show you like basically, well, come to that in a sec I guess. So as we saw, we've got, let's go back, we've got our name, our age, and our save field. Name, age, and save. If we open up the open up the source, you can see we have actually created something that looks similar to what we had in our tizag example. We've got our form with its post method. No action at the moment, that's important. So nothing's actually going to happen if we press the save or the submit button, whatever it's set as at the moment. We've got our fields, our type text, and what else have we got? Our age. Let's label input type number. So it's telling from the types that we put in, from like the form types, the field types that we're telling it, Symfony will then tell build the form appropriately. So it's setting the different bits and pieces on the form as you might expect. Now there's also something else in here. There's a hidden token for the form, and that's our, I believe, our cross-site request forgery token, our CSRF token, which again we've not had to do anything to get that in there, which is nice. So let's see, what have we got? Yeah, at the moment it doesn't actually do anything. Now, as you saw when I first loaded up the example, there was some data already populated in there, and that is because we're using I'd already set up like a person. So I'd instantiated a new person from the person entity. Where are we? If you've been following along with the examples, you'll have seen this in the Doctrine video. Yeah, so I've also changed up the pattern there. It used to be hello. If you've been following along, I've just changed it just to be slash. Let's see what else. Yeah, and then I've to clear the cache after that, after changing that route. Sorry, should have mentioned that at the start. Anyway, so now what we can say is, well, if we refresh this, you'll see because I've not passed this person into this form, there's nothing actually happening at the moment any different to what we've previously seen. So yeah, there's nothing going on there. But what we can do is say pass this person, and we can just get rid of these bits for now, into our form. Again, nothing should happen because at the moment it's just a new person, and these fields match up. If you like follow along, we have a name and an age in our form, and we also have it in our class. So these things match up exactly. So Symfony can just sort of say, okay, well, this data matches exactly, so we can just repopulate these fields. But as I say, there's nothing set there, so we refresh again, still nothing in there. But then we can just add bits in, like so. Set up our class, add some stuff into it. We're just setting the name to Billy the Kid, refresh it, and we're past it there. So because we've told the form to build from this class, it can just go into the class, pick out the matching parameters, and then sorry, I think it's attributes, sorry, and then it just repopulates and it calls the getters on there. So like the getters, where I would get name. Pretty sure if I do this, might have to clear the cache there. This should probably break it. unless that's a, let's see, yeah. So basically what it's doing is trying to call the get name in the background, or the is name, has name, whatever, but it's trying to call a method in the background, and that's where that's populated from. So let's put that back. I'm not sure if a cache clear is required there, but Symfony usually. So yeah, and then we also populate that bit. And there we go. I mean, this is important because when we get to using Doctrine with our form, you'll see like when we've gone into Doctrine and we've pulled out an entity, we can then reuse that to populate the form from the stuff that's in our database. So like it's pretty important, I guess. Yeah, so that's like a basic form. It doesn't do anything at the moment, and that's, I guess, the next part of the video. So yeah, I'll come on to that now. Okay, so we've got a basic form set up, but at the moment, as we know, it's not actually submitting anywhere. Nothing's happening when we're clicking submit. The reason for that is that we're not telling Symfony how to actually handle our form submission. And to do that, we need to use some new methods from the form builder, such as the handle request method, which just looks at whether the form has actually been submitted, and then takes the request variable, which we'll sort out in a sec. And then if all is good and the form is valid, then we do some logic. In this case, we're just going to redirect to the MCM demo homepage route, which is set up in here. Now, if you've been following along, this was set up as hello. I've just set that back to just slash. And if you do so, if you're following along and you're changing that, then do remember to clear the cache. I've just shortened it there. You could, because of that, essentially when you're typing in a console command, if it's unique after a point, you can just get away with the bare minimum, just laziness basically. Right, so yeah, we're submitting back and nothing's happening at the moment. So if we, well, the first thing that we need to do, I'll show you actually where I'm getting this from, not just making it up. So Symfony homepage, documentation, documentation, forums chapter. Down on the right here, we've got handling form submissions on the left, sorry, and we are just ripping out these bits. Basically, we're going to be using the request class, and we need to put it in here in our action. And then yeah, this is like some sort of free stuff that we get included for handling submissions, basically. Yeah, so we need to set this up. Request. Be careful if you're using an IDE that you get the right class, as it sometimes likes to put that at the top, the browser kit version. You want the HTTP foundation version, and we also want the request there. So that's all set up. Now if we set this up again, it's just going to forward us back to our home page. So we don't want to do that really, because it's not going to show us anything. So we're just going to exit and say form was valid. So now if we click save, if we reload our form, it's all right, save that. Form was valid. Okay, right. Now, because we've told Symfony to use, I had this, I think, set as text, but it still works because by default it will set a field type to text anyway. Yeah, so we can get rid of that. You don't actually need to tell it it's text. It's like a one-off. But it will also try and guess them. If you don't put anything in here, it will try and guess that this is of type integer. It's not 100% reliable, and you should just definitely always tell Symfony what type of form field you're using, even if it's just text. I mean, it's just sort of best practice, I guess. Yeah, so we've added in a text field type and an integer field type. Now, by doing so, we've also gained access to some of Symfony's built-in validation components. In this case, if we try and type in a load of text into a number field, it's going to tell us that this is invalid. Now, this is actually form validation in progress. It's not front-end validation. This is back-end validation. So one thing that we could do is set this to required. So one thing that you can do here is pass in a third parameter, which is always an array, and we can say required is false. And if you're wondering where I'm getting them from, it is on the form. Let's just see. Now you can get it from here, the built-in field types, but one of the better places to get this from is actually in the reference and the form field types, and then we've got integer. And then you've got all these additional sort of options that you can throw in here. Now, some of them are common and some of them are unique to the field type itself. Like these are specific to the integer field type, whereas these you will find on all of the different field types. I'm just using the required one here. By default, it's saying it's true. We're saying, actually, we want this to be false. We don't want to require this. So if we do go back to our form, and then if we just remove that, it's valid. Just to prove that that wasn't just a fluke, and take this bit out. Try again. Now we get this HTML5 front-end validation, which is to fill out the form. So we're saying actually, yeah, we can leave that as required false. That's to see, but we want that to be required true. Let's just do that. So we can actually tell it from, there's various different ways of telling the form front end to turn off HTML5 validation, and there are reasons that you would want to do this. Basically, you don't want to rely on it. It's not reliable. If people have various bits and pieces turned off in the browser, which they can do in the corporate world and all sorts of stuff, they can bypass your front end validation relatively easily, and that's obviously not what you want. So there's, as I say, there's various ways of telling the form to turn off validation. And if we look on the left here, you've got form validation. We scroll down here, you've got this HTML5 validation block. What it's saying is there's two ways of turning this off. We can either do it in the form tag, or we can do it in the submit tag. So if you was going to do it in the form tag, if we was rendering out our form like in the traditional manner, like form blah blah blah, we've actually got this no validate action and parameter, should I say, or yeah. So we just set it like that: form no validate, and then all's good in the world. But in this case, we're just using this basic Symfony twig tag thing to help us render really quickly. So we're just going to do in here array. I'm going to say attra, which is attributes for this field. Oh, and this takes an array as well, which is a little bit confusing, but I'll explain in a sec. And then we're going to say form no validate, because remember in here it was saying no validate if you're doing it on the form tag, but if you're doing it on the button tag, we need to use form no validate, and we're just going to say form no validate, straightforward enough. So the other things you can do in here is like set the CSS class. You might do like, that's quite a common use of the attra attributes tag thing. Yeah, so we could say like my submit button, whatever. And then if we reload that and then go to view source, have a quick look, we've got these additional bits and pieces added to our button. Yeah, so that's basically that. And then if we do form as valid, so yeah, it's sort of bypassing. If we put in this, see, because this is a required field by default, but we're bypassing that. Did I actually submit something? Yeah. See, you can see there it's the HTML5 validation has actually taken place, but it's been bypassed completely. So it's saving it, it's bypassed. But if we take this off and try again, see, so that's basically all that's doing, and that's why yeah, that's why you wouldn't want to use it front end anyway. But yeah, as I say, you've also got this. It's kind of easy to get confused between the HTML5 validation and the Symfony side validation. So even though we've got let's put that on. Even though we've got our no validate method set, the Symfony validation is still going to take place behind the scenes, and it's not going to let us do that because that is not valid. Like we're trying to put text into an integer field. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. Other types of buttons and stuff that we can use, as I say, can be found in, not buttons, sorry, field types. You've got all these different ones here. You can look at them at your leisure, really, but basically some of these will map up nicely to different field types, different parts of your database, like obviously date, time and stuff. If you're using dates and times in your database fields, these are going to match up. We're going to cover entity separately. choices. Yeah, it's like radio buttons and stuff. So you've got like the whole sort of set, and Symfony will automatically apply some validations depending on which ones you use. So yeah, very handy. Let's see. Okay, so at the moment we're rendering out our form using the twig helper function of just form and then the name of our form that we've passed in. So that's good, but as you've seen in the browser, it doesn't really give us a nice looking bit of output. And again, if we look at the source, everything's in one line. It's a bit messy, and yeah, it's not great. Now, in reality, you're more than likely going to be wanting a little bit more granularity when working with your form in your template. And thankfully, Symfony provides us with that. And we can get access to that by going to the documentation for forms, rendering a form in a template. And then you can see the first thing that we've got is this like a bit more detailed output. Now this is based on their template, their entity, so we're going to need to change things up a little bit. The first thing we need to do is change anything called form to our form, making sure we get each one. And also we're going to need to make sure that these match up. I'll cover these, I'll come back to these in a sec. So what this is doing basically is it's saying form start our form. So this would render out like the form, the action, the method, any other bits and pieces that are in there. Okay, and we'll just dump this here at the end. So that's what that bit's doing, and that's effectively what that bit's doing. But this is also going to throw in our CSRF tag, our cross-site request forgery token. So yeah, and then we've got our form errors, which is our global form errors. Anything that Symfony's validation can't seem to apply to a more specific part of the form, it's going to dump them out at the top. And then we've got our form row, which is actually a combination of three other elements, which is the label, the errors, and also the widget. Now the widget is basically a fancy name for the input box, or you know, input buttons, whatever. But that's what's going on there. And also at the end there's another thing the end tag does. It is like a catch-all for anything that we've missed, and yeah, and the CSRF token, which we can also render out manually. So we don't need any of this bits, because again, Symfony is going to do that for us. But what we do need to do is make sure that our form row is actually matching up to something that we have. So ours are called name and age. Again, we've added them in there. Just going to change these out to name and age. And if we look quickly before I do this, we've got this all in one line, messy. So if we save that off, refresh, hooray, nothing's changed. But if we look at the source, we can see that things have slightly changed. We've got our stuff is now on a different line. I think we must have put them, it's putting them into divs automatically for us. I think it was doing that before, but it was messy, so we couldn't really see. And then it's still ditching out the last bits and pieces, which we've not rendered, so it's like the catch-all stuff. Let's see, what else can we do? Now, that might be good enough for you. You might want to add divs and stuff and just tidy stuff up, but you can also then render out these rows more specifically. So if we just scroll down a little bit, then you've got this render each bit by hand, and if we do this, let's copy one of these in. Just paste that bit in there, and it was named. Okay, and then if we do, we'll just leave that as it is for now, just one of them done. Refresh that. We can see now that it's changed this even more, and we've got our label on one line as we told it to, a blank because we have no errors, and then a input, the widget. So it just matches up nicely there. So those are our three things there, and then we can do that for form age. Oh, something like that, age. And then let's just refresh. So yeah, basically now we have a nice looking bit of HTML. But what we actually wanted to do was, well, we're using Bootstrap, so we might as well just go ahead and use well, if you've been following along with our examples throughout, we have been using Bootstrap. So we might as well use the forms bits and pieces that are provided with Bootstrap. So the first thing we can do is stick our divs in like that, div class form group. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly pause the video and then resume it when I've put in the Bootstrap styles, and so you can see it. Okay, so I've just set up the basic sort of outline from Bootstrap. I've also put in our save button, and at the moment, if we look at this, you can see now that it's basically just rendering out. There's a little bit more padding and so on been put in. So the other thing though, if you look at the Bootstrap, the CSS, was that right? The CSS? I think that was right. If you look here, we do need to put in on our inputs various bits of CSS there, and yeah. Now, you could do this in the template, but I generally wouldn't. The reason being that your template shouldn't be, well, in my opinion, your template should be quite clean, and any sort of changeable logic should be going in your controller. Depends if you're working with more front-end guys or if it's back-end. If you're mainly a team of back-end guys, keep stuff, well, it's your decision, but you can put stuff inside these, like the widget here. You could do like, let's see, is it class? I think it's class. And then what's the form control? Just to see. Class. I might have needed to go in the attributes actually, so I'll come back to this in a sec if it doesn't work. Just refresh that. Nothing seems to have changed there. Let's have a quick look. Required. Yeah, so nothing's worked there, so we need to put this in attrib. So essentially what you're doing is copying the same thing from your template, from your controller. Oh my word. And this is why I don't like doing it in the templates themselves, because you end up with this mucky looking syntax. Let's see if that does it. Yeah, so we've like added a class in there, and I'll explain this a little bit better now. So we've added the class of form control, which is a Bootstrap thing, not a Symfony thing. Remember, if you're only using Symfony, this is not, if you've not got Bootstrap, then this is probably not going to make too much sense. But what we're saying is take the form widget, and we're rendering out our form widget of our name. Then we're adding in an array, which is what this weird looking syntax actually is telling it. And we're saying add in the attributes as we have done. No, go here. As we have done here, we want an array of attributes, and inside the array of attributes we want the class, and that's basically what this is doing there. We've got an array of attributes, and then in there one of them is a class, but it's messy and that's why I don't like it, so I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm just going to do a refresh, make sure that's back to normal. Yep. And then what I would normally do personally is actually put them into here. So I would do array, and then what, we've got the same thing here, so we might as well just nick it. Nick it. Alright, and then yeah, is that right? What's gone wrong there? Add attribute, blah blah blah. Oh, I don't need that. Silly me. And what's going on there? What's happening? Why won't it work? Add array. That matches that. Oh, I need one more. Dope. Right, so yeah, we don't want the class of that. We want the control group, was it? Something like that. Control group and control group. Form control. Bloody hell, get it right. So yeah, things have changed slightly in Bootstrap 3. Refresh, but there you go, it's taking it in now from the controller, and again we can just copy and paste this onto the integer. I'll do, and then we can change this to button large, button success, I think it is, something like that, and we just refresh that. Yeah, I'm sure it's button default. I don't know, they've changed everything again. What is it? Button something or other. Button, I don't know. Button LG. Man alive. Why do they have to do that? What's an LG? Yeah, so I mean, you just throw in stuff on there and it's just changing bits up. And again, you can, you know, go through forms, horizontals, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, if you wanted these things to display in line, I'm sure there's something in here that tells you how to do that. Is it in line? Oh, I don't know. I prefer the things next to them, but yeah, just been pedantic. Anyway, so that's basically rendering out your form. And you can see how you've passed in like attributes to your form, whereas your template itself is looking pretty clean. This can be quite confusing though to front-end devs, so yeah, it's one of them sort of personal preference things. I mean, you can also, as I've said, you can go into, if you go into the form types, say like the text, you can see certain things have got like the inherited options here. Text one's no good. You've got this, like the integer one has got its specific options, but then they all inherit these same options, like the label. But you've also got like the label's also got label attributes. Like it's not very well. Let's see, label. Right. So instead of, if we didn't want this to be called name, we could be called your name, and then we could also have the label attributes, which is an array. And then again, label attributes, array, takes that in there. Yeah, so like you can have the label has got its own different CSS class, and I'm sure there's something in here for, sure these labels have, always add labels, what's that? SR only, what's that? Screen readers only. Sure there's a way to get these to display in line. Let's do our control label. Let's just put this in, just so we can see it. Let's just try that. Brr. Let's just try call large 6. I don't know if this will work. No. I don't know. All I was trying to do is get this so that this box was in line. I don't know. It's Bootstrap. We're not learning Bootstrap. We're learning Symfony. So, but what I'm trying to show you really is that you can add in all these additional parameters, and yeah, that's how you do it. And it keeps the templates looking nice and clean. You do end up with a messy looking form, like, but you know, you've got to put the mess somewhere. The downside is, at the moment, is we're building this entirely in our controller action, which means a couple of things. Firstly, your controller looks like crap, and secondly, you can't reuse this in a different action. Say we had another action here, like, and this was called I don't know, my action, whatever. Then in this case, we're going to need to create the form all over again, and obviously that's not good at all. So we want to look at creating our forms inside reusable classes, and to do that, we are going to create our own form class. So again, this is just stuff straight from the manual. Scroll back to the top. On the left here, we've got a creating form classes, and yeah, we're just going to nick all of this bit because why not? And here you can see that their convention is to put it into your bundle name, form, type. So we're going to create our structure called form, and we're going to create one called type. Then we're going to create our, what is it, person type. And let's paste that in. Now we need to put in the tag. And we need to change this up a little bit. MCM, demo bundle, form type. And then we need to change this to person type. And then we've got these builder. So yeah, we need to change this as well to person. And that's pretty much it. We just need to copy this bit out, cut that out, and paste that in. So essentially what we've done now is created a reusable form class, and we can get rid of this. We can get rid of that entirely and save that off. Let's just go back to the form. And then instead now we can use this create form method. So we'll just copy that bit out Let's get rid of that bit. And then we just want to do person type. So yeah, and then make sure that your use statement's gone in. So it's looking a lot cleaner. And if we refresh it, this should all still work. The only difference, yeah, no, there's going to be no difference there. Oh, okay, fair enough. The data's not been set. Ah, that's because we're not passing in. Right, yeah. So all we've done is we've replaced that with the form builder method with the create form method, and we're passing in, it takes two arguments, the create form method. The first is the form that we wish to create. The second is the data we wish to populate that form with. So the person type form requires a person to go into it. I appreciate this bit is a little bit complicated. Well, not complicated, but it's a bit of a funky concept to get your head around. So I'm just going to sort of reiterate it a couple of times, a few different ways to try and get it through what I mean. If you understand it, fair enough, sorry, keep going over it. But what we're saying is, previously, let's just get rid of that. Previously, we were using the form builder to create our form inside the controller. So all our bits and pieces we put in there, job was a good one, we would get the form, it outputs, no problem. We also passed in the person. If we didn't, we just refresh now, we get the same thing because we've not passed in any data to that form. If we put the data in and change this to whatever, our form is pre-populated with our data. All right. Now, instead, we're going to pass this in a create form method, and we're going to pass in a person type. That's weird that it got rid of. Oh, it's because I undid. Yeah. So this time we're using the create form method, and rather than putting in all the crap there, we put it into this person type class. So we're actually creating a new instance of the person type class, which is this form. This form, this create form method takes a implementation of abstract type, so don't worry about that too much, but it takes anything that implements abstract type, and then the second parameter we can pass in, should we desire it, is the actual data itself. So again, just refresh, and we've got our form populated with our data, and we just change that up as, oh, don't want to do that. In fact, we don't want to pass it in a string at all. Silly me. And then, yeah, so cool. So that's basically it. We're just, now when we do a second action, like whatever, blah action, then we can reuse that form really quickly. No duplication of data. This, could now be like for whatever. And this, it can be completely different, and we get away with it because we're just reusing that class. So it's, the try principle, I guess, is what we're doing there. Don't repeat yourself. And that's basically how we use a form class. There's other bits and pieces you can do in here. We can tell it bits and pieces like what sort of data to accept and so on, but it's perhaps a little bit out of scope of a beginner's tutorial. There's this bit here basically, and we need the options resolver interface. You will see this though in the real world, so I might as well just put it in anyway, get you used to seeing it. Just make sure that you've got the right namespace and everything for your class set up, and then the data class here, you would do it like MCM demo bundle entity person. And again, this goes back to the same thing I was saying about these fields here. You can let Symfony guess it, but it is always better to tell it, like, so that there's no confusion, and any sort of magic that's happening in the background. If you can get away with not using that magic, you can sort of remove potential avenues of problems. So yeah, that's pretty much our form built using a class. It is pretty straightforward. It's the same. You're more than likely going to use it this way than actually building the form inside the controller because of reusability, basically. So yeah, that's creating forms and using form classes. Let's see what else. We can look at changing the method type in the next section. Right, so to demonstrate the next section, which is just how to change the method and the action of your form, I've set up a very basic sort of thank you template and a thank you route, so that when the controller goes through and is valid, it forwards us on to this thank you action, which will then render out little cheesy template saying thanks for stopping by, person name. literally, just to go through this very quickly, it's just going to return another controller action, and the action is in the MCM demo bundle, which is where we are. It's in the default controller, and it will forward onto the thank you action. Remember, you never put controller or action after either of these. Default controller, thank you action, you never put that in. Then we pass it a parameter, which is person name, which is what it expects there, and it's literally just the name of whatever's in the person name variable, attribute, whatever. So then that will return that, which is actually returning another method, which is just rendering that template out. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And again, I've put this route in. If you're going to do that, if you're following along, remember to clear your cache after you've done that. So the thing that's kind of weird is you might think that you put your set method and your set action inside the person type, to keep your controllers clean and whatnot. But if you think about it, if you did that, your person type would become sort of hard coded and not reusable. So you actually put this bit into the create form statement here. So what you would do, and this is relatively new as well, so it's on the documentation, it's in the forms documentation, and it's pretty much where we were, changing the action and method of a form. You can do it there if you're doing create form builder, or you can actually do it here if you're using the create form, if you're using a form class. I'm just going to take both of those bits out, paste them in because I'm lazy. Okay, so again, we don't really need to change our action because it will automatically submit back to wherever the form originally came from. But we're going to tell it anyway because it's best practice not to just leave it to guess. I'm just going to put that in there, and our method is going to be set to get for now, just so that you can see it in action really. And we're going to refresh and just take a quick look, and we can see now that our form method at the top has been set up as before it was empty, and I think the method was set to post by default. So if we do a submit, you can see in the top there you've got all the usual get crap, and generally you're probably not going to use get very often. You would want to just, I think it even defaults to post, but what we'll do is we'll set that here to post, and then we'll just refresh that, make sure that's changed, which it has, which is good. So now when we save, it says thanks for stopping by, blah 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 blah. Right, so that's good. So we're setting that action up, and but one thing that's sort of weird here is we've set up this action and set up a route which is just /thank you, and if we go to /thank you, this is going to cause us a problem. See, it's saying it requires a value for person name, but there's no default one set. Now you could add it in here. You could do a default value of person name. Actually, I don't think I need that person name. And then not set. You could do it like this. It's a bit rubbish. I don't know if this will work without yeah, damn it. Let's try again. So thank you not set. That's one way of doing it, but it's not the best way of doing it. What the best way of doing this is literally saying methods, and we only want to allow the post method, and then now we should get a different error entirely, because we don't want our users to be able to call that route directly anyway. So it's basically saying it's not allowed. And if you remove app, what do we get there? Yeah, 405 method not allowed. So you actually in the real world won't be able to call the /thank you page by itself. So that's just a few little bits and pieces. Now the benefit really of doing this, and again you can see you can do it in the template. That's your call. Well, the benefit of doing this really is that we can tell it exactly where to send our data off to, and that means you can separate out like the display of the form and the processing of the form and whatnot. So yeah, it's pretty handy really, pretty cool stuff. I said we'd cover form validations. I've covered the validations in as much detail as I want to cover in terms of forms at this stage. I will cover validation separately, as it's it's a bit of a larger piece really. And lastly, I said I'd also cover the CSRF token, and again that's just on the left, and we just click the CSRF protection, and in here there's various bits we can add into our default options, but what I want to do is just find the tag. Where's the tag? CSRF, because we can just render this out. I know, let's just see, Moscow, I have this somewhere, and what it is, it's like if we go into our form template, I'll show you one other quick thing as well before I finish this off. Where are we? CSRF. Oh, I should know. Here's the site after all. How to render just the CSRF token. So yeah, that's just that bit there. And you can, instead of relying on it to go in at the end, we can paste it wherever we want it to be. Form, I think we'll need to change that out to our form token. And we can just refresh that, see if that's worked. Yep, so we've rendered that out manually. Yeah, that just stops cross-site request forgeries. If you're not sure what that is, again, it's sort of out of scope of this video. Look it up on Wikipedia. What was the other thing I was going to show you? Right, yeah. One thing that you would probably do as well, because I've shown you how to reuse forms like that, you would probably want to put this into sort of like, what's this sub-template? It's nonsense. Let's get rid of that. I don't know. You might just call this like blocks or something. That's what I normally do, blocks, and then what is this, person form .html.twig, and then you would do like cut the whole thing out, paste that in there, lose all its formatting, of course, why not, why wouldn't it, get rid of that, knock it back a few lines, jobs are good, and just keeps things nice and simple. And then you can do include, and then what is it, MCM demo bundle, we're in default, aren't we, default blocks, slash person form, HTML twig. Let's see if that works. Yeah, because the advantage of doing that like that is that then instead of having to copy and paste the form bit in every time, you can literally just include that as many times, well, in any other template that you want. So it just becomes more reusable. And that's it really for forms. There's a lot more to them, and we're going to cover the more advanced form types, like the field types, specifically entity and what are the other ones? Let's go into quickly, have a quick look. I should know them off the top of my head, but I don't. Let's see what we got. Entity. Entity is the big one, really, because that's allowing you to get stuff straight out of the database, and it's a little bit more involved. If you look, yeah, you can use the query builder to create like a query of, say you've got like 20 different options in your database, but you only want to show the user maybe like 5 of them. You can write a query that shows just those off. What else have we got? Dates and times, we need to cover them. Checkboxes, well, that comes under entities again, as you'll see. Collections, and yeah, collections are like collections of subforms. Yeah, it does get quite involved, and we've really only scratched the surface of it, but that should be enough to get you started on Symfony forms. Thanks for watching.